Good morning. This is a brief tour of what's blooming this time of year, the middle of July, in the sunny parts of the garden. And because it's a mini tour, and because you're not going to allow me to give you a 2-hour tour of the garden, I grabbed this from the nursery so I could talk about this one plant without having to walk out of our way to see it. This is an aloe. The aloes are primarily only grow in frost-free climates. This is one of the very few aloes that's winter hardy for us. Now, we do grow it in extremely well-drained soil, and I think that would be required by the plant. And it's an odd aloe in that it dies away, it completely disappears in the winter, whereas every other aloe I know are evergreen in a frost-free climate. And some aloes even become tree-sized with trunks. But this is Aloe cooperi. We like to call it Alice Cooper. You can see it either when you walk past the crevice garden or the exit drive goes past the crevice garden. So it's a full sun plant, and should be successful provided you give it really good drainage. We've had it for quite a few years in the garden. Let me put it down and we'll continue. And I should start by saying feel free to ask questions as we go along. I can't possibly talk about every plant we walk past, but if I walk past something that is of interest, I'm happy to answer questions about that. Lydia is not going to let me talk about the heliotrope, but she says I talk about this plant every time. And it's conveniently located to the start of the our tour. This is a hybrid heliotrope, Augusta. Well, how convenient. Lavender, I always want to call it Augusta blue. Heliotrope looks a lot like verbena, but it's not the same family. It's in the same family as borage and Virginia bluebells, and like many members of the family, has a scarpoid cyme, which is a botanical term for the type of inflorescence, scarpoid referring to a scorpion. The inflorescence sort of uncurls as it blooms, and so it's curled over like the tail of a scorpion over its back. But it's noteworthy because it's in bloom nearly the whole year. This past winter it's stopped for a little while. The winter before that there was some bloom. This is a very sheltered spot, and I had it in my garden, and it didn't bloom through the winter, but once it starts in April, it'll go up until hard frost. And even if you're not concerned about feeding pollinators, it's fun to have plants that attract pollinators, and this attracts a lot of butterflies as well. You see it's growing in a very sunny location, very dry location. It'll tolerate both. Does not have to have a dry location. Alrighty. Down this way. Daylilies are a really good part of the summer garden. We're past main season, so if you like daylilies and you don't have any daylilies that are still in bloom, well then search out some late blooming ones. We sell a number of really good late blooming ones like Autumn Minaret, and one of my favorites just started, August Flame. Somebody bred it probably up north where it doesn't bloom until August, but here it's really July Flame.
Is that a spruce?
It's a fir.
Okay.
And most firs do not do well. And I think the reason why it got planted so close to the sidewalk is nobody expected to live to this size. I believe it's, the firs are in the genus Abies, and I think this is Abies born Mulleriana, which is more of a Middle Eastern species, I think Turkey and thereabouts, so not one of the high elevation Northern European firs.
Did you put lights on it at Christmas?
We spend absolutely no efforts on Christmas around here. And I'll retire the day that I'm required to put Christmas lights out on these things. With the star-shaped leaves?
Yeah.
That's one of the Japanese May apples.
Oh, okay.
The Asian May apples keep their foliage all summer long. Our native May apple, the Podophyllum peltatum, is largely going dormant this time of year.
Right.
Which is normal for it. And this damage to the foliage is just, they've spread this way, but now because they've come this far out of the shade, they get too much sun, and that's just sun damage to that foliage. There are some May apples that have really beautiful mottled foliage. I do want to just take a little detour and talk about this plant. You know, there are plants like lilies and daylilies that are spectacular when they're in bloom for a few weeks. And there's other plants that maybe aren't ever spectacular, but they bloom, you know, for months and months and months. And this often has more bloom than this, but this is one of the leadworts. Wort is merely an old English word for plant. I don't remember why lead, but this is Ceratostigma wilmottiana, and it dies to the ground most winters and then quickly regrows and it will bloom all summer long, and it's such a beautiful blue. Much better known relative is the little ground cover one. That's very lovely and much more shade tolerant than this guy, but that's only in bloom for maybe about 6 weeks, while this is in bloom for many, many months. We're gonna head this way now. Oh, you know, I love the alliums that are summer blooming. They're easy, reliable plants. A lot of them bloom for an extended period of time. You know, this has been blooming long enough that some of the inflorescences are done. You can just snap them out to tidy up the plant, but then there's spikes of new flowers coming up. They're great cut flower, if you don't mind the slightly oniony smell, and they're great for pollinators. Which one is this? Is this? It's none of these. Well, what's that?
Got 3 tags.
Yeah, for a bunch of things that are dormant this time of year, like crocus.
Does that need a freeze like the big alum does?
Need a freeze?
I read that the larger alum that gets like this tall needs a freeze for it to really bloom. No?
Well, we get a freeze here. Are you gardening in a frost-free location?
Well, Wilmington doesn't get that much cold.
Yeah, I suspect it would do fine there.
Okay.
This is a lot like one Millennium is a real common one. Pink Planet is similar, but is a taller thing. That's a real lovely one. Those big alliums that are grown from bulbs, a lot of those really don't do well for us even here, and we get a freeze. There's one that has been quite good for us. You know, I started here 3 years ago, and it's still blooming 3 years, and a lot of those great big bulbs don't even bloom well their first year. And the one that's been really good for us is an ambassador. You know, these don't grow from a bulb, and they're just sort of truck along year after year. A very rare Baptisia, and very different than the spring blooming Baptisias that have great big spikes of flowers. This is a Baptisia arachnifera, meaning bearing spiders or spider webs, I guess, because of the fuzzy leaves. We enjoy it, you know, most of the summertime just for its silvery foliage. Alrighty. Yeah. This Allium is pink planet. You see it's quite a bit taller than that one. Alrighty. The Liatris, most people call them by their scientific name, Liatris. They're also known as gay feathers or blazing stars. It's a genus native to North America, and I don't know, maybe 24 or so species, and you'll always know it's a Liatris when you look at it, but they vary both in height. This is one of the taller ones. Some only get, maybe 2 feet tall, and some bloom early, some bloom late. There's some really interesting pollinators on this. I don't know who that is. The Hymenocallis are one of the plants called spider lilies. The Lycoris that bloom in late summer are also called spider lilies. They're related to Amaryllis. They're in that family. Again, it's a fairly big genus. Some are, this one is mostly done blooming.
Do you sell some of those?
We have one, certainly one for sale. I'm not involved with the nursery much, so but yesterday I saw Hymenocallis durangoensis from Durango, Mexico, that was for sale. That's a good one. Oh, and the Crinums are really great summer plants. This one is without a label. The little green flags tells us our plant records keeper is supposed to determine who this is and put a label on it, but I believe this is Bradley. But if it's not Bradley, it might be Ellen Bosanquet, but I think it's Bradley. But the Crinums make a big volume of foliage, and certainly in Wilmington you see Crinums a lot of places. But they're one of those plants that gets bigger bigger, but I meant to say better the longer they're established. They'll bloom more, they'll have more flowers, but also some of them tend to repeat more once they're really well established.
Can it handle full sun?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
What did you say was the name of them?
Crinum.
Crinum.
Yeah, most people call them Crinum lilies. Again, they're same family as Amaryllis. You see it's like an Amaryllis in that you have a naked scape, a flower stalk, and then all the flowers up on top of the stalk. They grow from a great big bulb. Yeah. You don't trip over the wheelbarrow or whatever that thing is. Now, this daylily doesn't look like much because it's a night blooming daylily. The night blooming daylilies open up about 7 o'clock and are open, I assume, most of the night. I'm not a night owl, but by the time I get up to daylight in the morning, the flowers are already closed. But it's fun if you have like a patio or something that you use in the evening. They're very fragrant. If it was 7 o'clock or later, we would be smelling its fragrance from there. That's one called Flyover. I think it might be either straight. The daylilies are Hemerocallis, and this species is Hemerocallis altissima, meaning very tall. And some of the tall hybrid daylilies get their tallness from this wild parent. But this is the orange cone flowers, and a lot of members of the aster family are things to leave once they're done blooming, because the goldfinches will come and harvest the seeds, and then the little button in the center stays attractive through most of the winter. Little Joe Pye weed just starting. This is a compact form of Lilium formosanum. We call it the giant strain, and I think it's earning its keep today. Look how that one branched. But they're 100% reliable. They'll be in bloom in a few weeks. They look like a big Easter lily, but they They seed around a fair amount. Now, I don't know if anybody is noticing sort of a honey fragrance. This tree is in bloom, and that's what all this is, the spent flowers. This is Heliocarpus, and Heliocarpus means oil fruit. Apparently makes a fruit that is edible and oily. Oh, look at. But I wanted you to see this lily. This is a Japanese species. This is Lilium speciosum. Speciosum meaning very showy, and it's one that just gets better every year. See, the big butterflies like to visit the flowers, and they're big enough to get this pollen transferred to the stigma. It's one that we have offered for sale in the past, but I think we're trying to build up our stock now. It's nice to see a lot of tiger swallowtails in the garden. I didn't see many last year. Yeah, this selection we call 4th of July. It's a little later than that. What is today?
You know,
the 12th of July?
Is something like that deer resistant?
No. No, deer will eat lilies. They might eat hostas first, but they will eat lilies. They won't.
I mean, rabbits. Moles love the bulbs too, so yeah.
Well, and humans eat the bulbs of lilies. I've not known deer to like eat the entire plant, but you know, maybe almost worse than that is big clump of lilies, they just bite out the flower buds up at the top. Yeah. Maybe this location is a little bit awkward for them to get to, but in the sun garden, there are lilies that manage to bloom, but there might be a clump of 20 stems and they'll get a few of them. Alrighty. I don't want to walk past this plant without talking about it, but I probably don't want to encourage you to grow it, but it's a great plant if you have a wet site, and it's a native plant. And somebody please count the number of pollinators visiting the flowers. This is water hemlock. It's as deadly as the poison hemlock that was used to poison Socrates. But we generally don't go around eating the plant, so it's not a problem unless you eat it. Now, it's the same family as parsley and carrots and cilantro and you know, fennel and dill. So you can never know if just because one member of the family is edible doesn't mean that other members of the family are. And people often poison themselves when they're out in the woods and they're scavenging for food and they find something that looks like a parsnip. Well, they end up eating something like this. But it's a beautiful plant and a great plant for pollinators.
That's what I thought, it was wild parsley.
Yeah. Well, and the bean family is also that way. You know, obviously beans are an important food crop, but there are many members of that family that are poisonous. Oh, it still has a bit of fragrance. Oh, here. If you're on a low sugar-free diet, this Crinum is my favorite one for fragrance, and these aren't really fresh any longer, but you might get a suggestion of the flower. This is Mrs. James Hendry. She's also a less voluminous plant, but the fragrance is really good. The cardinal flowers are starting. Cardinal flowers are, an individual plant is generally short-lived, but it replaces itself with lots of seedlings if it's happy in the garden. It prefers a damp soil. Lobelia cardinalis. There's other species that are common in sort of drier woodlands. A plant only if you have a wet spot, the Echinodorus. It'll take over a wet spot, so be forewarned. And one of the reasons why it's such a successful colonizer is that after the flower stalks are done blooming, they start making all these little plants at most of the nodes, and all of those, bend over and eventually can root into the soil. But it's a beautiful foliage plant. The foliage is really stiff, and it's in bloom all summer. The big hibiscus, these hybrids are hybrids between a number of species, so it's hard to call them anything but hibiscus. Hibiscus is a large genus. Not a lot of members are tropical, and some are woody, but all of the wild parents of this type of hibiscus are herbaceous perennials. They die to the ground, but they return every year. They're very cold hardy. Some of their parents are native, well up into northern North America. Wide range of colors nowadays. This is sort of an average sized flower. Not to maybe everybody's liking. They're sort of fun, but I like some of the more wild ones. This is an example of a wild hibiscus. A little bit more subtle. Okay.
Open house days are based on demographics.
Cannas are, blooming all summer long. This one obviously just has green foliage. There's many selections with really beautiful, colorful foliage. They are, if you have cannas, you'll eventually have leaf rollers. They're not really leaf rollers because they are actually leaf unrolling preventing caterpillars, which is what I used to call them until a coworker called them seal tights, because the mother puts silk. Do you see the little silken threads along this edge? And she puts those threads here to keep the leaf from unrolling, and then lays eggs, and then her offspring, the adorable little caterpillars, are eating here in the protection of the leaf. And I don't know, are we seeing any? Is that one there? I got to pull my glasses out. They might have already matured, and there are some there.
There's little eggs still.
Yeah, and lots of poop. Yeah, and probably a combination of both.
Okay.
But so if you have cannas and you want clean foliage, you're going to need to protect them with BT, the bacteria, the same bacteria you use if you're growing cabbages and similar plants. But the wide range of colors, big ones, small flowers, beautiful foliage. But oh yeah, that's a really prominent one there. We see it well enough from here. This orange ginger lily gives you much the effect of a canna in bloom, and I've not known anything to bother the ginger lilies. Deer tend to not eat either one of them, so they're not bothered by that pest. But we don't ever have to treat the ginger lilies for any kind of insect pest. Whereas cannas, if you grow cannas, you're going to have the canna leaf roller. This is a real common color in the ginger lilies. There's others that are a pure orange. They can be white, they can be yellow, they can be pink. And they'll do fairly well in shade. Well, some of the species actually prefer shade, but many of the common ones will do just as well out in full sun. I hadn't seen this lily here. That looks like the regal lily, one of the Chinese species that's the parent of the big trumpet lilies. Garden phlox is a great one for bloom for months in the summer. We just grow ones that are mildew resistant. If you're growing summer phlox and yours always gets powdery mildew, the leaves turn white, rip it out and replace it with one that doesn't get powdery mildew. They'll thrive in full sun. They don't have to have sun all day. I don't know who this Raleigh is. I don't know that we've ever had a name. And a plant that would do even better for you in Wilmington is the Clerodendron speciosimum. Makes a big head of scarlet flowers. It's a bit of a runner, so if you have a small garden, we'll see that big leaf over there is the same plant.
Yeah.
A lot of the Clerodendrons are runners.
What is that tall one? I've seen it before.
This is the fruit of one of the Amorphophallus, one of the corpse flowers. This is a Japanese species, Amorphophallus kyuzianus, which is referring to the Japanese island of Kyushu. And it's one of the least showy in bloom, but it's the most spectacular in fruit. Tony likes to leave them for open house, but all these fruit that have already been shed means that next year I'm going to be digging up seedlings.
Yeah, I saw one variety and they said they were poisonous.
I didn't say whether or not, well, I'm calling them fruit.
Okay.
And let me explain. I'm using fruit in the botanical sense, not whether it's edible or not, because there are poisonous fruits. Fruit is that part of a flowering plant that bears the seed. So that includes edible fruits and poisonous fruits.
Okay.
Now, I don't know if the seeds are ever eaten. The tuber of Amorphophallus konjac, which is another one we can grow here, is consumed. And just like its cousin taro, which are elephant ears, they are poisonous until they're cooked. But once they're cooked, taro is, we don't eat a lot of taro. I have to go to a dim sum restaurant to get taro. But it's a major, major food crop in the tropical world. It's the native Hawaiians venerate the original taro cultivars that were introduced by the Polynesians. But I don't know if this species is eaten. But it's incredibly beautiful spike of flowers. Oh, well, that's more for next week. Well, next week I'm doing the same tour, but it's on shade garden and the curcuma's shade garden plant. Butterfly bushes are great for summer long color. We haven't talked about any salvias. The mealy-cup sage, Salvia farinacea, started in April and will go up until frost in November. Sometimes if summer is really long and difficult and the plant looks shabby, we'll cut it to the ground, and about 3 weeks later it's back in bloom for the rest of the summer. The only selection of Salvia farinacea that has not been winter hardy is the one that's the most common in the nursery trade, the seed strain called Victoria. But any of the other ones are fully winter hardy. It can also be white. And farinacea is referring to farina flower, because if you look at the calyx, there's sort of a powdery, waxy coating on the outside. You'll see a lot more hibiscus selections along that side. The Agapanthus are not in bloom for months and months, but they are spectacular when they bloom. This is one called navy blue. Many decades ago, the only Agapanthus that were available were a tropical species that was evergreen. Some of these, like this one, were bred in Michigan, and they are winter hardy into zone 6, so very cold hardy. One of our favorite pollinators, the hummingbird moth, which you look at it, is it a hummingbird or is it an insect? Well, it has antennas and 4 wings instead of 2. Really fascinating creatures. The zoo is open. A quick zip up here, and then I'll let you explore the rest of the garden on your own. We saw Tony's sparkling burgundy pineapple lily. I don't know who this is, but it's fun to have the mixture of colors. And it's standing up really nicely because pineapple lilies sometimes flop over. I think by the time they're done blooming, each one of them has, one of the former flowers has a fruit, and maybe just the weight of it all. But if you want a cut flower that lasts, they'll last for months as a cut flower.
Does it bloom most of the summer?
Well, they remain, they're technically only in bloom for 2 or 3 weeks, but the flower stalk remains, it looks like it's in bloom. Yeah. See, these are in fruit. This one back here is still blooming. You can see it, the stamens and the pistil, but these are all little fruit, and it's fun here when the actual fruit is purple and the calyx around it is green. Yeah, and that one's still blooming.
So do the deer eat this?
They will eat it. It's not the first thing they eat, but they will eat it. I mentioned this daylily. This is August flame, and it's just starting. You see most of the buds remain, but it's really bright and cheerful. And you know, this is sort of like the blue ceratostigma in front of the house when we started this tour, in that if it only looked like this for one day, you might not bother with it, but this is in bloom for months. It's a same genus as the houseplant, spider plant, Chlorophytum. And which one is this? Chlorophytum boykeri, named for somebody named Boyker. And I just love it because it's a really strong vertical in the garden, and it's in bloom for months. Okay. A plant only for a garden, if you have lots of room, is this hybrid coral bean. This is Erythrina bidwillii. It's a hybrid between a tree and a herbaceous perennial, and it sort of can't decide what it's going to be. And it dies to the ground each winter, but it blooms you know, all summer long. It's always just a spike here, a spike there, but it's such a, you know, really gorgeous red. If you have a wet site, the meadow beauty, the Rhexia, will probably show up on its own, and I think these might have, and they're a bit of a spreader, but they're blooming for a long time in summer. This is sort of the most common color, but they're sometimes white as well. Another Agapanthus, blue moon, I think, full moon, nice one. Well, the deer are very present in this garden. A couple of my co-workers reported eaten hostas this morning. It's not the first thing they eat. They're in the Amaryllis family, as are daffodils, and they tend not to eat members of that family that much. That Crinum's making a night show in a number of daylilies. And, you know, one of the,
My style is, I'm a very static climber.
We met the Hymenocallis. This is a very closely related plant. Ismene, I don't know how to pronounce that. Oh, this is actually, I see a hybrid between the two, Hymenocallis, combining the two names. It sort of takes the membrane and enlarges it so it often looks like a daffodil, almost looks like a daffodil. And the Ismene parent is called Peruvian daffodil. Really beautiful thing. And the Crocosmias seem to have fallen off the radar of gardeners, but they're really beautiful plants blooming for a good, 6-8 weeks in the early to mid-summer. Also a great cut flower. They're really closely related to gladiolus, and they grow from a corm just like a gladiolus, or very much like their distant cousins crocus. And iris family members generally are left alone by deer, though they do like to eat the flower stalks on, they got the flower stalks on this gladiola. It's sort of, they'll wait until the buds start to open and then they'll deadhead them before their time. Well, I think we might call it a tour. Certainly invite you to, go through the rest of the garden.